Welcome to my midterm governor prediction. So let's start with Virginia. So between Terry versus Glenn Youngkin. So even though there's been a lot of hype behind for the Republican Party in this race, I just don't see Youngkin winning. Yes, he is getting quite close. There's still a lot of undecided voters. He would have to win a majority of them to win. And at the moment, I just think that Virginia is just a bit too far gone for the Republican Party to win. There's also the chance that Youngkin pulls a win, but at the moment, the Democrats will either win here by either a lean margin or a tilt margin. It could change, but I think it's going to be a lean margin for them. And now for New Jersey, so Phil Murphy, the incumbent, is going to go against the Republican, Jack Sitterly. And as you can see, even though I don't trust polling that much, I think for small things like governors, they're not that bad. Some people say it's going to be either likely or solid D. Even after the debates, I think the Democrats will narrowly win a safe governor's seat in here. You could say it might drop to a likely, but it's New Jersey, so I think the incumbent Democrats will win here. And there we go. So let's start for Oregon. I think that in Oregon, Katie Brown, she was a pretty unpopular governor for many Republicans, and I think there's going to be some turnout, especially since it's going to be a midterm for the GOP, but even then, it's only going to drop to a likely state. And now, let's talk about Colorado, New Mexico. I think Colorado is going to stay the same as in 2020, around 10 to 12 points. The real thing that is going to be interesting is New Mexico. Incumbent Grisham. I think she's going to win by either a likely margin, but I don't think it will drop to a lean unless the GOP really nominates someone good for Hispanic turnout. But I think it's going to be an okay win for the Democrats. And now let's talk about Texas. So Greg Abbott, pretty sure he's going to win re-election in 2022. I mean, the only way I see him losing is if we see something funky with, I don't know, like Matthew McConaughey coming into the race as like a third-party candidate or running as a Democrat. But even then, I'm just going to make this stay as likely. Now, for Florida, even though DeSantis has did hit a low point a couple weeks ago, I think he should do well. I think worst case scenario for him, he's going to win by a lean margin. But I think he's probably going to win by either something around 5 through 7, maybe 8 points if it's a really big red wave in 2022. And yeah, let me go to Minnesota. So incumbent governor Tim Walz, pretty popular governor at the moment. I think he's going to win, or if he decides not to run last moment, I think any Democrat will easily win in this state. And now for Iowa and in Ohio. So both Iowa and Ohio are probably going to keep the trend of like likely seats for the GOP in here, similar to what we saw in 2020. And both Kim Reynolds and Mike DeWine will probably win here easily. And now let me talk about who should I talk about next. So let's go to Maine. It's pretty interesting. Incumbent Governor Janet Mills is seeking a second term, but at the same time, you're seeing that Paul LePage, the former governor, is going to try to run. It's going to be really hard for him to win, even though he has gotten endorsement from Susan Collins. I just don't see him winning at the moment unless we see something breaking happen. And I think that the Democrats will win this state by a likely margin. Maybe lean if things go south or it's a big red wave, but at the moment, likely. Okay, now let's talk about Kansas. So Kansas, one of the few Democrats governor in a really Trump state. So Laura Kelly, Democrat, is gonna try to seek a second term, even though this is a really not extremely red state, but it's gonna be a really hard time for him to win. In 2018, let's see, she won by less than 5 points against Chris Kobach. So yeah, I just see her having a really hard time in this election, and I think the GOP will probably narrowly pick up this seat by a lean margin. as long as they nominate someone that's electable. Worst case scenario, I think it's tilt, but I just don't see a way in which the Democrats keep the seat somehow. Maybe, but I doubt it. And now let me talk about Connecticut. So for Connecticut, it's a really interesting state. So if you go back to 2018, Ned Lamont only won by 49% against Bob here. I'm not going to try to say his last name. By only 3% in a red wave year. So that's really interesting. And if it's going to be a red wave in 2022, it really just begs the question on what's going to happen. There's a couple of nominees should primary by the GOP. Bob is going to run again, but it's really going to be interesting. Who knows what's going to happen, but I think for now I'm going to leave it as a lean margin, similar to 2018, but this could either go from likely to even tilt, so I'm not going to try to explain it too much. And now let's move on to, let's do Arizona. So Arizona is a really interesting state for now. So the Republican primary, there's a lot. There's Kari Lake, former news host and anchor, I should say. There's Matt Salmon, another Republican, former House representative. And there's Kimberly Yee, really, really interesting candidate by the GOP in a good way. I think that she would do pretty good, really, against most people, against most Democrats. At the moment, it's really between Salmon and Kari Lake, but if you're going to run a Republican in, especially as governor of this state, you will need a lot of the votes from the McCain bloc. While for the Democrats, their main person is going to be Katie Hobbs. Katie Hobbs, former Secretary of State. I think she's still Secretary of State. And at the moment, I think that the GOP will narrowly keep this seat. They will win this seat by either a tilt or a lean margin. I think Kimberly Yee would be a really good candidate. I'm not sure if she's going to win the primary. She could win it. And if she does, she could easily make it like a lean, but for now, tilt, because we don't know the candidate. So for now, for Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who is really despised by a lot of the GOP, is within danger for her 2022 run. So there's a lot of people, but the main one is James Craig, who is the former police chief, and I think he would do really well in the suburbs. And he could get carried by the red wave in 2022. Yeah, he's really the main guy. There's a lot of undecided voters, but he's almost certainly going to be the GOP nominee. And most people think it's going to be a battleground. It's really back and forth between Craig and Whitmer, but really going to depend on the economic and issues of the time and the political climate. So maybe perhaps the GOP could win here, but I think incumbency and everything, it's still Michigan. Bear in mind, it's not extremely red. So I think she wins by a tilt margin in this state. And briefly for New Hampshire, it really depends on if Sununu runs for Senate in 2022. If he runs for Senate, the Democrats could, theoretically speaking, win here. But if he doesn't run for Senate, then it's really going to stay the same. And because of how weird that is and the fact that we don't know who's going to be the nominee, I'm just going to keep it as tilt, even though it could easily go for the Democrats if Sununu runs or not. Even though he said he was going to announce if he was going to run or not, but it's kind of getting a bit kind of late, so. And now let me talk about Nevada. So, incumbent Democratic Governor Sisolak will go against the GOP. There's no noteworthy candidates by them, but bear in mind the Reid machine is not what it used to be, so it could be a surprise by the GOP in 2022. But I think they just don't have a really good candidate that could make a surprise. Even with the Reid machine, being a bit dismantled, you could say. I think the Democrats will win here by a tilt margin at the moment. And now let's talk about Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, it has a blue governor, a Democrat, Tony Evers. He will try to seek a second term, but first of all, with it being probably a red wave in 2022, and the state is trending to the right, there's a lot of people that want to really defeat the Democrats here. And at the moment, even though it's saying like it's gonna be lean deal or battleground, it's gonna be a nail-biting race. So, and because it's probably gonna be a red wave in 2022, I just don't see that incumbent Democrat governor winning here. I think that the GOP will win here because basically the state is just trending to the right. And now for Pennsylvania, the incumbent Democratic governor Tom Wolf can't run, just term limited, and there's a lot of candidates by both sides. So I think the main one is going to be Josh Shapiro by the Democrats. He's probably going to be the nominee, while for the Republicans, oh yeah, that's the lieutenant. So for the Republicans, there's a lot. So there's Lou Barletta, William McSwain, and it really depends on if they're able to get carried away by the red wave. It's a true toss-up by most people, and I think they're right. But I think that people would not want basically a Republican trifecta. I don't think that the people that split their votes will like that, and I think that GOP will lose in this election. I think the Democrats will win narrowly in the state of Pennsylvania in the 2022 governor race. And now for the state, or I should say the governor race that I'm most gonna say it's a true toss-up is really Georgia. So first of all, the Republican incumbent governor Brian Kemp is really hated by Trump because Trump basically said he should have overturned the election or even called a special election for that sort of stuff. And he's a really weak candidate because of how fragmented the Georgia GOP is. Vernon Jones will try to primary him, but I doubt that. And we all know that the Democratic primary, it's basically a done deal. Stacey Abrams will run in 2022, and it really depends on a lot of things. First of all, how big turnout the Republican Party will get, how big of a turnout the Democrats will have, and if there's going to be stuff like big voting lines, and don't forget the Georgia bill as well. But it's really a true toss-up. I wish I could just leave it as toss-up. I know you guys hate seeing toss-ups, and because of that, Stacey Abrams could easily win here, as well as the incumbent governor. But at the moment, I think that only because it's going to be a red wave and Georgia bill and that sort of stuff, the red wave will narrowly carry the Republican governor. Okay, so as you can see, the Republican Party wins with 28 seats with majority against Democrats' 22 seats. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.